What's up, my beautiful people? Welcome back to the War Room. I am your fight goddess, Chris Baldwin, and I'm here with my sister, Melissa Smith. She is a women's boxing historian, and she's got a dynamite book coming out. You guys stay tuned for more details on that. And my boy, we are here with Mr. Eddie Goldman. We call him the conscious of combat sports. What's up, folks? I have been tied up watching this Alec Baldwin movie trial. So I have not watched any boxing. Right? I completely forgot about boxing, but I understand that Amanda Serrano injured her eye and could not fight this weekend. So, Melissa, I'm going to kick it off to you today to give us an update on women's boxing. Take it away, please.
Sure. So, Amanda was supposed to have a unification bout against the German fighter Nina Meineke, and there had been a lot of press about it. It was Jake Paul was also on the card. It was in home. It was in Puerto Rico. It was a really, really big deal for Serrano because it was her real homecoming. And as of the time of the fight day, they had sold out 18,000 seats,
Wow.
which was the highest boxing event in the history of Puerto Rico. So it was a
Wow.
really, 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 really big deal. And, Amanda Serrano has been a big proponent of 3-minute, 12 round championship fights. This was contracted to do exactly that for the IBF, WBA, and WBO. Her opponent is a 18-3 fighter, as I said, out of Germany. Has won championships, but for like smaller belts. Her only really big fight was Katie Taylor back in 2017, and she lost in a seventh round TKO. So we don't know exactly how competitive this fight would have been for her, for Amanda, but it was a really, really big deal. And as I said, because she's from Puerto Rico, this was homecoming, 18,000 seat audit, arena sold out. Cool. Well, Thursday, apparently, and there's some discrepancies on the severity of all of this, but on Thursday, she went to a hairdresser to do something with her hair. Apparently, something got in her eye. Now, Jake Paul in the ring said it burned her cornea.
Oh, my
We
goodness.
don't know. That's what he said, but
She
nobody.
said she had an exposed cornea, which is,
Ooh.
no, I'm not an
Right,
ophthalmologist. It's an actual medical
right.
condition that if it can be simple to, we'll get into that. I'll let you go, but it
But
could be
anyway,
simple to treat or it could be serious.
Mm.
right. So anyway, that's what he said. So by Friday, so something gets in her eye. Friday, it's really bothering her. She lets the MVP team know, most valuable promotions. She says, "Hey,
She
something
says she
happened
lets the MVP team know Friday.
on Friday," and they concur in their public statements. They concur that they were told on Friday. Now,
No,
again,
they
this
say
is
they were told on Friday. There's
that's what
no
I said.
independent
They
verification of
concur.
any of this.
Well, that's Eddie. Can I finish? All right.
Let
This
her
Okay.
is
finish,
what
Eddie.
I'm
Let her
trying to
Um,
finish.
say. All right. We don't know, but this is what we're being told. And Serrano has, says she told them on Friday, and MVP concurs that they were informed on Friday. They also, they also apparently went to, or we've been told, went to see a private ophthalmologist who recommended taking drops, and she was using a medication on her eye. She went to the weigh in. She was wearing dark glasses at the weigh in, very large dark glasses, which she kept on even when she was being weighed.
Those glasses right
And
there in this picture behind me.
yeah. So she was wearing those dark glasses during the weigh in itself. So that in itself is okay. That's interesting. Usually you strip everything. You're not wearing your glasses because that's weight, even if it's a few ounces. Um, then apparently, I guess we don't really know much after that, other than, and according to a statement from the MVP press release, Amanda came to the arena, quote, this is a quote, with the intention to fight, given her eye was starting to feel better. MVP's position was that she will be examined by the Fight Night Commission appointed physicians, and they determined if she could compete. The doctors determined her vision was impaired near the end of Juana Walton's bout and would not approve her to fight. MVP goes on to say in their press release, we then had a responsibility to communicate to all impacted constituents involved in the event and determine how best to communicate it to the fans in attendance and those watching at home. And the way that came out is they let Jake Paul's fight go. So Jake Paul, somewhere around the fourth round of the Juana Walton fight, they know Amanda can't go on. They're quickly huddling. Jake Paul is getting ready to go on for his fight. He fights. He gets a knockout or TKO. He wins. And then he announces with a very tearful Amanda behind her sunglasses in the ring to say she has an exposed cornea and something on her hand. And the fight's canceled. And then Amanda is crying and apologizing and all of this stuff. And then the first thing was MVP came out with a statement saying that they would refund anybody who came in attendance who wanted their money back, and they were going to be paying Nina Mienke in full. And that's where it stands. That's the public view, but it's a mess, as Eddie has clearly and rightly pointed.
This
Can't hear you, Chris. Chris, you're.
I was saying, how disappointing for Amanda to do her homecoming fight and then have an injury
homecoming
on
fight,
that night.
and then have an injury is something so dumb as you're at the hairdresser getting your hair braids or whatever it is that you do.
Right, if that's dumb. The story.
Who knows?
That's the official story.
That's
right,
the story.
That's the story
on their press releases. We'll never know. It's a fog.
Well, it's a general rule to view press releases with the highest amount of skepticism.
Of course,
because there's so much stuff in this. First of all, this whole timeline is something that they put out. There's no independent verification of any of this stuff. They also say she saw a private doctor. It doesn't say an ophthalmologist. It just says
a
private doctor
who gave her drops.
Yeah. Now, she supposedly injured her eye on Thursday. She didn't tell the promoters till Friday afternoon. Then Friday evening, a private doctor came, which means that the commission didn't know during the weigh-ins. And the sunglasses she was wearing either could have been just something, fighters bring along in case they get banged up around the eyes and they want to go to the press conference with sunglasses, or it could have been the kind of sunglasses that ophthalmologists give people with eye problems to keep out glare and, dust and so forth. But that hasn't been clear. So my view, and then she tries to fight, and the onus of determining if she fights is not on the fighter, because we know she's a warrior. We know most boxers would go fight under any conditions. She couldn't see in one eye. She still wanted to fight. That's the mentality of a boxer. And that's also why we have commissions. As soon as the commission learned that she had injured her eye and that she was taking prescription eye drops starting on Friday, the fight should have been canceled. Because even if her vision would have improved a little bit, she would need time to heal. This is a very serious injury, and she's going to go in the next day and have somebody punching her in that eye. That's that would mean that she, endanger her vision for this fight. So to me, even the official story that they released sounds like there were attempts at a cover up. And what they wanted to do was keep the fans there, even though they're going to give refunds. They knew Jake Paul and the other rest of the undercard were going to fight. And if they had announced Friday or earlier Saturday that Amanda Serrano was scratched and they were giving
Oh,
refunds, even if they had put on the card with
Sure.
Jake Paul, the arena would have been, very empty, and it would have been
wow.
embarrassing to them. So they decided to conceal that from the crowd until after all the other fights were finished and they were waiting for the main event. And they say, oh, by the way, Amanda Serrano can't fight. This is just trickeration that went on. I don't know to what degree the when the commission knew and all that, that really hasn't been entirely cleared. I just can't see any doctor clearing her to fight so soon and risk getting punched in the eye after
Oh,
having a serious injury that required prescription eye drops, not something you buy over the counter that a doctor has to prescribe.
Right.
So
listen,
there's a lot of
th-
nonsense.
and this is what Paul said, right? He said it just goes to show what kind of warrior, woman and warrior that Amanda is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She still wanted to fight with an exposed cornea and the skin burned off of her eye.
But
Paul
let me
said.
just say, how would a regular doctor know that her cornea was exposed?
You wouldn't. I don't understand. This is what's kind of screwy. And this is what happened in the ring. He says the chemical was also burning her hand. You could see the skin on her hands melting. What? She's so tough. It's very sad. I wanted nothing more than to support her and cheer for a
If she
fighter as
went
well.
to
What?
if she went to an ophthalmologist, they have all kinds of. I mean, I have a lot of vision problems, so they have all kinds of tests and all kinds of machinery there that can look in the eye and do all. They might dilate it or they might not, depending on her eye
Hmm.
condition. They could use an ultrasound. There are all sorts of different things to see what's going on. That's something that would be done by a professional.
Right.
And as you point out, though, is we don't know who she saw. We know she went to a doctor on sometime in later on Friday. We don't know whether this was an ophthalmologist on an emergency basis or she just went to, or a GP or she went to the local emergency room. We have no idea.
Yeah, there
As you
are
say, it's
ophthalmologists in the emergency room, but the point is that this is a major change in her medical condition. When was the commission
yes.
informed of this?
And we
Sounds
do
just like
not
Saturday
know.
afternoon or evening.
Sounds like Saturday when they did
That
the
she had
thing is,
started getting
shh,
prescription eye drops. That's
here's
serious.
the thing. There's photos of Amanda on Friday afternoon at the weigh-in getting her blood pressure taken. So she was getting an exam there, right?
Right.
That's part of what that's about. So,
Right.
and there's no indication that the commission was informed of the eye problem at that time. Although we just don't know because so in other places it states, well, they said they would check her, at, in the middle of the fight night and give the go no go at that time. So they may have known earlier on Saturday at the very least, and they begged and pleaded to let her, oh, let my eye heal another few hours before they gave her the ultimate no, because it may have been no earlier. We don't know.
Right. I just can't see any doctor
No, not at
saying
all.
on
Clearing her,
Thursday or
saying,
Friday saying you're going to be able to fight Saturday night with
Right.
this. You're
no,
going to need
yeah, with an
whatever period
exposed
of time
cornea.
is to
No.
heal.
And the skin burned off of her eye and her hand that's melted. What? How is she going to have a hand wrap? never mind her eye. How do you do anything on your hand if it's burned and you've got hand wraps and you're wearing boxing gloves and you're sweating? And so it
Right.
just it doesn't make
It doesn't make
sense.
sense. And according to willseye.org, it takes about 1 to 5 days for even just an abrasion on the
To heal.
corneal, right, to heal.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
they did that to
There's
fill up
something.
those seats, Eddie. That's exactly what that was. We
I
can't
agree with
tell
you.
them until just before the
They
plane.
had their banner ticket. They had
Yep,
18,000 seats sold.
that's right. And that's a lot. That's like almost $1 million,
That's a
right?
lot of money.
That's a
That's a
18,000.
lot of money.
Yeah, that's
That's a
like,
lot of money.
all right.
And the
And
So
fact,
most of the media didn't point out any of these discrepancies. They just
no, no,
repeated what
they
was in
did
the
not.
press
of
release.
course, that's what they
Yep,
do.
yep,
They regurgitate. They don't analyze, Eddie. You know better
yeah.
than that. Okay, look, what happened with Clarissa Shell's
Oy,
fight.
oy, oy.
I
Oy,
I
gabba.
saw one
Boom,
of her
boom, boom,
training
boom, boom.
videos for the MMA where she was being coached, the guy trying to choke her out. She had to tap out. But did she win
She
that fight?
cannot find
She
on
won.
the. She won by a squeak, a little squeaky squeak, little
Hair on her
squeaky
chinny
squeak.
chin chin.
She was down for 4 minutes. So the problem with Clarissa, she has zero ground game, nothing. She
Right.
she cannot get somebody off her. Once somebody's on top of her and has her on the ground, she doesn't have the skill set and the leg strength, or the she does not have the ability to
Right.
coordinate her body to push them off.
Yeah.
And in the first round, she almost got in an arm bar, but recovered there. Then she clearly won the second. And she started out the third round, really strong. She was basically using her upper body and really wailing on the girl. But then she got
So she
the
used
first
most
time
of
she
her
got on the
box.
ground, she popped up, and then the second time, that was it.
So she used her boxing skills on her
She used
stand-up
her
game.
boxing skills, but she was using them as MMA boxing.
Oh
You know,
gosh.
it did not
Oy,
look like pretty boxing. It looked like
uh,
MMA strikes, right?
it's
With
not. It's not.
I
The
want
thing
my
about
baby
ugly,
to stick to boxing, girl. Stick to boxing.
right?
yeah. We'll get. I'm going to comment on that, but first I want to talk about the ground game thing. It's not so much the leg strength. It's how you know how to move your
Do
hips and
it.
legs.
Right.
Yep, yep,
Wrestlers
exactly.
walk differently than boxers. There's a reason for that. You're used to moving a certain way in wrestling, where obviously in boxing, below the waist, all you're doing is moving. There's your footwork, but it's a very different type of footwork. Whereas in wrestling, you have to be, most styles anyway, you have to be aware you're trying to shoot for a takedown below the waist and you're trying to defend against that. So you're bent over, and when you get on the ground, you learn to move. I even learned that a million years ago in high school wrestling, or you just move a certain way. You know how to put your weight on your opponent. You know how to hold them down.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
Right.
something you don't do in boxing. And she only picked this stuff up in her 20s while she was already at the top of the world in boxing. We know her, undisputed champion, a couple of weight classes, 2 Olympic gold medals, all of that. She put all of her athletic training into moving like a boxer very successfully. And now she has to, in part, move like a wrestler or a grappler, as some people would call it. And you just can't pick that up at that age. And so the other thing is that, I think she might be picking up some bad habits from the MMA in terms of the boxing, with these overhand right punches that look like a baseball pitcher throwing an overhand pitch. They do that in MMA because most of the fighters there don't move their head, either go straight back or just stand there like the Statue of Liberty. and get clobbered that way. You can't do that against a decent boxer.
Right.
And that was a lot of the punches, the right hand she was throwing were like that. What she did do in the MMA fight, which you rarely see MMA fighters, at least when I was watching it, do, is landing a lot of body punches. But the fight was too short, and she was on her feet too short of a time for that to make enough of a difference to break down her opponent. And remember, I don't remember the exact record her opponent had, but she was fighting a 35-year-old that had what, two or three pro MMA
Should
fights.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
She's
at least two losses. I think one win, two losses.
something like
Yeah,
that. And so she was fighting somebody who was a very lower ranked, inexperienced MMA fighter, nearly submitted her in the first
yeah,
round. And in a
yep.
fight, arguably, could have been called a draw. It was a split decision, but they talked about the announcers, who are MMA people, were talking about all these improvements she made because she just did some minor things up around the cage. She should be entering the prime of her boxing career. Instead, she's learning how to fight with her back to the cage and get off of that stuff. I just don't know how much more money she's making doing this PFL stuff on undercard. This was, by the way, not on their pay-per-view. This is a big pay-per-view that PFL had, the MMA company she's with, since um, they purchased Bellator because Paramount used to be CBS and Viacom, got rid of a lot of their sports product, and so PFL had a PFL champions versus Bellator champions. That was the pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia, and the Public Investment Fund and the people that are dealing with sports in Saudi Arabia and are investing a lot of money in PFL. And they hosted this, which is like, this is their big marquee event because it had their most famous and top fighters there. She was on the undercard that was on in the US, was on ESPN News. It wasn't part of the pay-per-view. So I don't know how much money she's really making from this. It just says that the women's boxing is still not getting the due that it needs to get, that she has to go lay on the ground fighting off some low-level grappler from choking her out and getting her in an armbar instead of doing what she does best and is at the top of the, I'm not big on pound for pound ratings, but certainly in her own weight class, she's head and shoulders above everybody else. That's what she should be doing. And that she's not doing it just says that it's still women's boxing in enough places is not being taken seriously enough. Now,
It's not.
this was the first women's MMA fight in Saudi Arabia. And there's been one women's boxing fight there a year and a half ago. Ramla Ali got a first round knockout. Now that the General Entertainment Authority in Turkey, Al Sheikh, who is involved also with this PFL show, have taken over running the boxing, they have not put any women's fights on, including the whole card of Joshua versus Ngannou coming up. Why not? You're having the top boxers against each other. Fury versus Usyk, assuming that happens. Bivol versus Beterbiev. Joshua, assuming he wins, against the winner of Fury and Usyk. Opetaya is fighting Bradis, and many other Zhang and Parker is a top level, two top 10 fighters that are on the rise now, and on and on. They're having all these top fights that haven't been made in the U.S. or the U.K. Why can't they have women's boxing on there when they can have
Listen, Eddie,
MMA?
there's still no women's boxing here in the United States.
All
You got
right.
BBC still refuses to put women on their cards.
Yeah, they're going to
There
have
only
no. They're
there's
not going
only
to have any
two.
men pretty soon, also. But that's
Well, that's
another.
another story. But they're going to go to Prime. They're doing their first Prime Video pay-per-view under the Keith Thurman's. Like, who cares to watch Keith Thurman anymore? But there are no
Right.
women on that card, so what the hell? This is a whole new opportunity for them,
Yeah.
and they're still blanking out. The only women you see on major programming is Golden Boy and Top Rank, and Top Rank has all of two women, and Golden Boy has what, three, and
Right.
they have some good stuff going on. But that's it in the United States, except for club shows where there's a lot of activity and a lot of women fighting. But these are lower down. Uh, the thing about PFL is they've also signed Savannah Marshall. And the
Mhm.
idea there is to have Savannah and Clarissa meet in the cage, and we'll see how
That
that
is
goes.
crazy. Okay, that is
And
just
it's
ridiculous.
nuts. And then you got Amanda Serrano is also signed with PFL, and they're signed for a
What?
lot of money.
Oh my
Yeah,
Lord. But
they're
that's
She
what
at
all
it
least
is.
yeah.
has some jujitsu training, Amanda Serrano.
Oh,
Serrano, she's done okay in her early. She's had some MMA fights. I think she's what, 3-0,
yeah. But the
3-1.
conditioning is totally different. Yeah.
It's a totally different game, and for Caressa, who did nothing but box from the age of 11, it's not like she did karate or Muay Thai or Aikido or any other kind
Right.
of martial sport. She never did. So it's really problematic. But who the hell is she going to fight? I mean, there's nobody there for her right now. And the fights they tried to make with like Tasha Jonas, they were trying to find a catch weight there. That, excuse me, that didn't happen. Uh, and then you got this nonsense. Alicia Baumgartner calling her
Oh,
out. I mean,
good
that's
Lord.
ridiculous. The girl's
Right.
my height. I just saw her at the gym. She can't fight Clarissa Shields. You crazy? So we'll see
How
how it
tall
all
is
goes.
Baumgartner? And Clarissa was on
She's
Twitter
5'4".
calling her Baumgartner.
Well, no,
BUM.
I know. I mean, listen, don't get me started
Okay, but
on all of
anyway,
that. But
but good.
but meanwhile, there's great fights happening. I mean, women's boxing continues to roll. You're going to have Katie Taylor and Chantel Cameron 3 in Ireland coming up in the end of May, and
Maybe.
Right.
so well,
All right. Don't
it's
throw any
scheduled.
dookie on it, Eddie.
No, I want to
Okay.
It's
see it. I
scheduled.
just it
It's
isn't
scheduled.
official yet.
Well,
Right.
it's as
It's
far as
not
I know,
official
it is.
yet, but again, it boils down to for women's boxing opportunity and pay equity. That is the bottom fucking line.
That's all of it is. I
Yes.
mean, and you do have things happening. I mean, Matchroom and Boxer, which are both um, promotion companies out of the UK, routinely have really great women's boxing at all levels, at championship, and then they have kids that are coming up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they have it all the time. And that's where the action is. It's not even in Mexico these days. It's not even in Argentina. It's in the United Kingdom,
Oh
and
wow.
they're doing their fights here in some cases. If it's a matchroom boxing fight, what is it? Sky Nicholson is going to fight in Las Vegas in April. I think it's April 8th. She's going to have a WBC fight. It's going to be in the United States in Las Vegas, but that's Matchroom bringing it here.
Right. Well,
So
your girl Heather, the Heat is
Heather,
doing bare knuckle
she's going
boxing.
to
I
do
saw
bare
that,
knuckle
Eddie.
boxing with Christy Ferreira.
Oh
Oh
my
my God,
Lord.
my Lord.
I may
Oh,
have to
God
watch
bless
that.
Heather. God bless Heather. Heat is something. She's also,
Yay.
launching a business, being basically a business coach to boxers, male and female,
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, listen, you're a commodity, and you got to sell yourself because they could care less.
They sure
I'm here to
can.
teach you how to be your own commodity and take back the means of production here."
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
meanwhile, she's still looking for sponsors. All her tweets are everywhere on social media. She's looking for sponsorship for this fight, for this bare knuckle boxing fight, and she's going to be in this league thing
That is
with
just
on a
she's
team
ooh.
with Melissa St. V and Ronnie Ronica Jeffries and Natalie Brown. Natalie
Wow.
Brown, who hasn't boxed in years, she's coming out of Canada and going to start boxing again. it's crazy because there's nothing happening here. So
Right. You got to make some shit happen. That's how it is
you got to
sometimes.
just make it happen. There's no HBO, there's no Showtime. People are just
Right. Doing their own thing.
throwing stuff all over the
That's what
place.
you got to do. All right, let's
Yep.
move on to Eddie. Now, you wanted to chit chat about what's happening
Dillian,
with Dylan White. I cannot believe they cleared him.
no,
They didn't clear him.
that's what the media says.
See, there you go.
All right. I'll just
Can't trust the
the only
media.
media report that repeated everything that was in Dylan White's statement that made any, which was sent to Sky Sports. Again, Sky is what a source for the media, was Reuters repeated all that, and then they added this disclaimer: Reuters was not able to independently verify the details of the investigation. It was put out that White was cleared. Who has the power to clear him? It says that there was an investigation by a forensic expert. They didn't give the name of that expert or the credentials of that expert. This so-called forensic expert, and this might be true, I'm more explaining the bullshit from the media, that the positive drug test was from a contaminated substance, that they looked at everything he ingested. Even if that's true, there's supposed to be a policy of strict liability. In other words, you may get a reduced suspension if it wasn't your fault. You may, but you still get the whatever benefits from that PED were in your body, even if you took it unintentionally. And it was also never made clear if White was ever suspended or had a hearing with the British Boxing Board of Control, since this involved the fight last year with Anthony Joshua in the UK. They were the ones overseeing that fight. They kept talking about the Texas Commission, the TDLR, which is where he got his license, but the fight wasn't in Texas. They don't have anything to do with it other than to honor whatever is decided by these other commissions. So that's not clear what the British Boxing Board of Control did, which probably means that they did nothing. So the power to say that, okay, you're allowed to fight now, rests with the British Boxing Board of Control and the authorities there. There just are too many ifs in this report that was put out. Yet the so-called boxing media, which, wait till I get to talk about what they're doing in Saudi Arabia, just repeated the press release. They repeat the press release from Miranda Serrano and MVP. They repeat the press release from Dillian White. They'll repeat anything. Put it out in a press release and they'll repeat it. That's what they do. It's awful. So right now we don't know what the situation is with Dillian White. If he can box, that's up to the British Boxing Board of Control, and we know they're very, very inefficient and inconsistent. Them and UK anti-doping. This is not a UK anti-doping test. This was a VADA test, and they might try to get off on it, that being on a technicality. It's all very, very unclear. In any case, Dillian White's at the end of his career, so he might want to just get another easy win or something and then retire. But it's just another fiasco and another situation where a fighter tests positive and there's little or no enforcement of what the rules are supposed to be. Meanwhile, if you follow other sports, as messed up as they are, there's a French football player. I don't know what team he's on now, but he's one of the most popular guys in the world, named Paul Pogba. And I may be mispronouncing it because I really don't follow that sport. He was just tested positive for testosterone. He's 30 years old. He got a 4-year ban internationally from that sport. And I'm right in the prime of his career. But in boxing, they'll find whether it's Baumgartner or White or Conor Benn or somebody else, they're finding ways to wiggle around it.
Cheap
That's
assistant.
the mess that we're in.
Mm-hmm. That's a shame. Okay, so Dylan White, so if he has supposedly been cleared and he's looking for that cash out payday, because that's what he's doing. He's looking for that final payday.
Sure.
You think he'll be fighting in the next 6 months in the year?
Knowing boxing, probably yes, because it's such bullshit enforcement.
That is
I
ridiculous.
mean, look what happened with Conor Benn, that they still haven't had the full hearing in Britain.
And he's
The
fighting. Yeah.
He fought that Florida lets him in because he wasn't suspended. And the reason he wasn't suspended, that UK anti-doping and the British Boxing Board of Control denied him a license, but he got away on a technicality that the positive test was from VADA. It wasn't from UK anti-doping. This kind of legal nonsense doesn't change one whit that he had a positive test.
Right. Well,
it gives me a headache trying to keep all this stuff straight in my mind.
Absolutely right. And then on top of that, you have all the jurisdictions and those failures. Right. I mean, we've talked about this with the state of Michigan that still has not said boo on Alicia Baumgartner.
Right, but I thought that every fighter, well, at least back in the day when I was managing fighters, you had to look it up on their fighters rec to see if they had a suspension anywhere. It wasn't just in the state that you were trying to fight in, but it was did you have a suspended license
she
anywhere?
She remains suspended by ABA, but the state of Michigan has not adjudicated her case.
They're the governing
body.
Right.
They have done nothing. You've got WBC came out with a statement that said, "Oh, well, yes, there were drugs there, but we don't that they were there for reasons unknown. So everything's fine, but she'll face a suspension, and she's going to talk about drugs."
That's her community service.
Yeah, essentially, like nothing happened.
Right.
Move along.
Bullshit. That's a bullshit.
We don't know how. I mean, yes, the test was positive. We just don't know how it was positive. So,
and that's now what everybody is saying, that test positive for a PED is saying that I
don't know. The dog.
I don't know
where
it came from. Medicine. It came from my steak. It came from
my dog. Yeah, bullshit. That's Hannah Gabriel.
Came from outer space.
The dog medicine. My dog medicine had pets. Oh my God! How did that happen?
And then you got my dog. And then King Ryan, talking about, I don't do coke, I smoke weed and drink. I was like, oh wow, that's the era of boxing we're in right now. Okay, there's like, I drink and smoke weed. Like, dude, you shouldn't be doing any of that shit while you're fighting.
You're a fighter?
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole other issue.
Save all that partying for afterwards.
He is in a tough place, but
well, that's another game.
Fodder for another day. And
that's another conversation. For me to say. Right. So, Eddie, look, what's going on with this AJ and Ngannou fight?
All right. I do want to discuss this fight, and if you want, I don't know if you want to do it or not, we can make predictions. I'm expecting AJ to win, most likely by a stoppage in the second half of the fight, but we're going to see how they both look when they come in. But there are some issues that have to be dealt with before everybody in the boxing media is discussing who's going to win. Ngannou knocked down Fury in their fight in October. What does that mean? AJ looked really good against Volin, but will he look good in this? He's been too cautious in other fights. All these things are being discussed, and those points are valid, but it's the same stuff over and over again. Here's something about the situation in Saudi Arabia and the media that I have not seen anybody else in boxing discuss. And when I get into it, you're going to see why. And this is not from some secret sources, independent investigation, leaks. This is stuff anybody who's on a search engine can find this stuff if they know how to use a search engine in about 3 seconds, maybe 5 if they're a little slow with their fingers. The U.S. State Department still has a travel advisory out regarding Saudi Arabia. And I'll quote, it's called Reconsider Travel to Saudi Arabia. Reconsider travel to Saudi Arabia due to the threat of missile and drone attacks. Exercise increased caution in Saudi Arabia due to terrorism, the risk of arrest based on social media activity, and importation of prohibited items. Some areas have increased risk, and they specify more near the border of Yemen. And this is something that particularly is important. And I'll just read it as it is. Be advised that social media commentary, including past comments, which Saudi authorities may deem critical, offensive, or disruptive to public order, could lead to arrest. This may include posting, reposting, or liking comments about Saudi institutions, policies, and public life. U.S. citizens, and listen to this carefully, U.S. citizens have been convicted for social media activity under Saudi laws concerning cybercrime, terrorism, and disrupting public order. Punishment for social media activity has included prison sentences of up to 45 years in some cases. Saudi courts do not necessarily consider the time frame of the posts or the location from which they were made to be material to these cases. And in other words, if you say something critical about the monarchy and their Sharia law, you could anywhere, you're sitting in America where it's perfectly legal to do that, and you put it up on social media or in an article or something, then you try to go to Saudi Arabia, you are risking arrest, and people know this. The UK government on their gov.uk side on the foreign travel advice, while they don't specifically say reconsider travel, they mention, quote, criticizing Saudi Arabia and Islam. It is illegal, meaning in Saudi Arabia, to post anything online that could be seen to criticize, insult, or ridicule the, and in this list, Saudi government or authorities, king, crown prince, or royal family, countries, culture, and beliefs. You could get a long prison sentence even for posts published outside Saudi Arabia many years ago. Now, who's the media that's flooding now Riyadh to cover the AJ fight with Ngannou, and also Zhang Zhilei and Joseph Parker, which is a fight a lot of people are looking forward to, and it could be more competitive. They're mainly from the UK and Europe and the United States, and which means that they can read this stuff too. Like I said, you find it, these are public documents from the US and UK government. They're most likely aware of this. So they could discuss who's going to win this fight. But in terms of dealing with anything else, they have to shut their mouths while they're there. If there's any abuses, of migrant labor, if there are people that are discriminated against or maltreated or whatever might be going on, it can even extend to the conditions in which they are met, the conditions of Riyadh that they see in the city, or the transportation, or anything else that they don't particularly like. This has now, the U.S. statement says that U.S. citizens have been convicted for such social media activity. And if you think they're joking around, and if you think this is just sort of unnecessary, or if this is exaggerating things, aside from understanding what they did to Jamal Khashoggi, there was an interesting story that came out last month where a U.S. Committee of the Senate invited the leaders of 4 U.S. consulting firms: Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey and Company, M. Klein and Company, and Teneo, to testify before the Senate on the public investment fund's investment in American businesses. And this is something being done, surprisingly at this time, on a bipartisan basis. And the Saudi kingdom, this is from an article, which is this one from? This is from an article called "U.S. Consultants Threatened with Saudi Prison Time. Could live golfers be next?" And it said, the Saudi Arabian kingdom told these companies that their employees could face financial penalties or prison time for cooperating with U.S. Senate subpoenas. And the statement that was made by one of the representatives of these companies basically told the U.S. Senate, an American company, told the American Senate that because the Saudis say this is a violation of Saudi law, they couldn't comply with what the U.S. Senate wanted. Quote, the PIF has been explicit that the disclosure of information relating to, this is BCG's, work for PIF is a violation of Saudi law, which imposes criminal penalties for disclosing or disseminating which information, including imprisonment for a maximum of 20 years, a fine not exceeding 1 million rials or both. That's from Rich Lesser, chairman of BCG. In other words, if these Americans cooperated fully with the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Senate committee and what they wanted, they risked going to jail for all this period of time. And their employees in Saudi Arabia also risk some type of penalties that go on. And the article was on the Playing Through site, which is more dealing with golf, said, could golfers be next? In other words, Saudi Arabia is calling these people employees. Would they consider the Saudi-funded Live Golf golfers to be employees in Saudi Arabia? And what about, and I'll just take this for boxers, since, again, I'm not real familiar with golf. I don't really follow it particularly. What about all these boxers going over there on these events that Riyadh Season is putting on and that the Public Investment Fund money is behind? Would they be considered employees of, say, Riyadh Season or the Public Investment Fund, meaning that they have to shut their mouths when they're asked about Saudi Arabia and just say, yeah, everything is great, I'm being treated great? And the same thing with the media that's there supposedly reporting on it. Now, there was an interesting article dealing with this from the Atlantic Council, which is a think tank set up sort of in cooperation with NATO. And it was talking about the sports investing that Saudi Arabia is doing. And it said that U.S. negotiators working with Public Investment Fund on the merger, this is of the PGA and Live Golf, should also emphasize the massive negative blowback that would occur if golfers are prevented from speaking their minds or if other controversial restrictions are put in place. To avoid these issues, U.S. negotiators should also ensure a strong governance structure for the new golf entity. Well, we know in boxing, there's no strong governance structure at all. So this is being discussed and debated because if you defy a subpoena and refuse to testify before the U.S. Senate, you could go to jail. So what these consulting firms are saying, well, if we testify, we could go to jail, and our employees that are in Saudi Arabia could go to jail. But if we don't testify, we could go to jail here in the United States. And this is a dilemma that exists. What it means, basically, is that there will be self-censorship. And so I'm not for just coming out and using tar and feathers on Saudi Arabia. They've been funding a lot of good things in boxing, fights that we otherwise wouldn't get. They were also funding a fight, bringing Ngannou into boxing, which I consider to be still to be a fiasco, giving him this attention and turning this still into a spectacle, not running it like a sport. But if you said something like that over there or even over here and then go to Saudi Arabia, you could risk going to jail for a long period of time.
We would all be locked up.
Hence, the people that are going over there are basically just doing softball stuff or just debating who won Fury versus Ngannou, what's going to happen when Joshua fights Ngannou, and just that type of stuff, and stay away from anything else. And when asked about Saudi Arabia, oh, everything is fine. They're making changes, which they are there. I don't want to discount the changes going on in Saudi Arabia. I think particularly the left analysis that's come out of sports washing is complete eyewash, not sports washing. It has nothing to do with what their motives are. Their motives are to increase their GDP from sports, increase their tourism, increase their trade, increase their investment in Saudi Arabia, manufacturing, transportation, all of that, and start to develop into a more modern capitalist country. That's a transition that they're doing. And the sports industry, as it is in the advanced, established capitalist countries, we know is a major part of that. So just when you see all these reports, and I've been starting to watch a lot of these little interviews and read a lot of articles on it because I am interested in this fight, just know you're getting something just like you're getting, as I said, with the Serrano situation or the Dillian White situation or these others. Just know that you're getting the official story, not necessarily the real story. And what it means is if you try to do something like that, the so-called boxing media and the sports media in general is pretty useless. So that's where we're at. But we can discuss the fight. I'm not against discussing the fight as a fight. I just wanted to put that out there because I haven't found anybody else doing this stuff. And and all the stuff they said, Google it. You'll find just what I found.
Yeah, nobody's going to talk about that, Eddie. Because they truly don't care. It's all about the money. All about the money. And they're lazy too. They're not going to dig for that shit.
You don't even have to dig. I mean, it should
They're
be
not
standard.
doing anything extra is my point.
If you're traveling to another country, regardless of the country, wouldn't you go, if you're an American or if you're a UK citizen or whatever, wouldn't you look up and see, okay, what are the requirements? What can I do? What can I not do? Do I need a visa? All that kind of stuff. What you would look all that up. So they got to be aware of this stuff. I mean, I don't know the visa requirements of Saudi because I'm not traveling there, but if I were going, I've gone to other countries and I've looked up there, do I need a visa or not? It's obviously different for everywhere.
Right. Well, I know I'm not going to Saudi Arabia, so I'm not really concerned about being arrested in Saudi Arabia because I'm going to continue to criticize the Saudi government and those people funding the sports washing. That's what I call it. All right. What else we want to talk about? You got anything else to cover, Eddie?
I think I think we pretty much covered it. We're getting we're getting a lot of publicity and shout outs on our friend Alva Johnson's show, which is on Thursday nights on Radio Free Brooklyn. It's a music show, and Chris could probably better describe what is it, house music
House
or
music, baby.
okay, it's mainly house music, and she's on from 7 to 8 Eastern, Radio
Love
Free
that.
Brooklyn. And so we're getting shout outs on that. And she is also a boxing fan too.
I love that. Right
Yeah.
on. Right on, Alva. Thank you for supporting. Keep doing your thing. Is that her name, DJ Alva?
Yeah, I don't know if she actually describes herself as a DJ. She's a radio host. I think she
Right
once
on.
said she's technically not like a DJ that you have at a club.
Right, right.
That isn't what she does.
Right
She's a
on.
radio DJ. That's what the DJ was. A disc jockey came
Right.
from
Exactly.
radio, and now it means something else. But
Exactly. Exactly. Well, look, thank you, Alva and team over there at Twitter for checking us out. Thank you for the love. Melissa, you want anyone want to cover anything else before we bounce?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
All
Just
right.
there are women's boxing things happening soon. So
Excellent. All right. We'll tell the people where they can find you.
well, I just launched a new website. It's called
yay!
melissa-smith.com. That's Melissa, Malissa -smith.com. And it's kind of what I'm calling my author website. And it has my the two books that are already out and my third book, The Promise of Women's Boxing, a
Right.
momentous new era for the sweet science, that'll be published in June. So it has those pages. It also has a link to my girl boxing blog where I continue to write pieces about women in the sport, among other topics. So I'm real excited. I just got my proofs done. The next step is reviewing the index and then waiting for the books to come out and coming up with a list of folks to review it.
All
So
right.
if anybody wants to review it, find me.
Hey,
Yeah, I'll do.
I'll
I'll
read.
do.
We'll do. You know,
and
we'll review it.
yeah. So anyway, I'm really excited and feel very proud of the effort and proud to remind people that there are women in this sport who work their hearts out and for no money and continue to do it for no
Right.
money and no opportunity, but just for the love of the sport and for the love of each other. So on Twitter, and I still am on there for the boxing stuff because I can't seem to find a community anywhere else. I'm at Girl Boxing Now, at Girl Boxing Now on Instagram and on Threads. And thank you all for listening and
Right
showing your love and
on.
your support.
Right on. Well, thank you. All right. Eddie, that's on you. Tell the people where they can find you, my friend.
Well, the main place is my Patreon, and I encourage people to subscribe to that because, again, you're getting a kind of analysis that, as I explained in depth, you're not getting elsewhere. You're getting just a lot of repeating either press releases or just very simple type of situations, softball interviews, and you're getting also the people just interviewing fighters like they just started doing this. I mean, I started doing this and putting people on the radio and then on the internet. Well, a lot of these people were, still running around in their playpens, and I don't think, I'm not real impressed by a lot of the stuff that goes on. And it's the way of transmitting information now is through YouTube videos rather than writing. It's a degradation of the written word, and the development of the written word and writing and literature were really steps forward in civilization. And it appears that in a lot of ways we're regressing. And I think this is part of it. And so my Patreon is patreon.com/Eddie Goldman. Subscribe to keep this going. It's mainly about boxing. Sometimes I throw some other things in there about wrestling or combat sports or something else, but the vast majority is about boxing. And I'm still on Twitter for similar reasons as Melissa. There just isn't the traction that I find on these other social media sites. Is too little traffic, and a lot of it is just very simplistic. And I find that even the discussion on Twitter, not counting, the trolls and the haters and all that, just gets worse and worse. That more and more people are posting stuff on Twitter without attribution, without saying where they got the information. And it might be real, but unless they're a news source or unless a source is put, I just, I have to double and triple check this stuff because I've seen some things that might be similar from somebody supposedly in a similar political vein as me, just post stuff that is flat out untrue. Oh, it's just getting worse and worse. So I don't know what the alternative is. I don't know that there's going to be an alternative. I think we may be moving into a post-social media era for serious discussion, which is also something that's not very good, particularly with these elections coming up and Russian disinformation and disinformation from Iran and other Nazis coming on, just flooding everything. So that's where I am. And of course, I keep track of a lot of my activities, eddiegoldman.com, and you can contact me at any of those places if you want. That's it.
Right on. All right, what everybody? Well, you guys can find me on Instagram at Fight Goddess One. I am still on Twitter at Angry Afro Radio. I'm also on Threads at Fight Goddess One. Yes, Eddie, we got to keep this conversation going because we don't want to do surface stuff. We want to support independent journalism. We are at the intersection of women's rights, sports justice, and equity, equality, all of those things. So we're going to keep doing our thing as much as possible because, sometimes we miss a week or two, but we are back here to give you guys the best that we can give you in independent journalism, brought to you by the two experts on the panel because I am not the expert, right? I am just a fight fan and I love the sport of boxing. And you guys support our independent journalists. That's Melissa and Eddie. And we will see you next time. Until then, peace, love, and push ups.